A lot of people can talk, a lot of people have knowledge. Like in Hebrews 13, verse 7, it says, remember your leaders, those who spoke the word of God. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. Look at their lives too. Look at how they live. Can you imitate? Do they look like Jesus? Do you look like Jesus? Do you act like Jesus? Do you love like Jesus? Do you love like Paul? We had this missionary speak at our church years ago, and at the end of it, he went to Papua New Guinea, won a tribe of the Lord, the whole thing, beautiful story. At the end of it, he says, I owe it all to my youth pastor, this guy named Vaughn, who just loved me and told me this is what my life was supposed to be about, is for the glory of God. And I thought, that's awesome. And then the next week, I had another guy show up, and he was talking about sponsoring kids. And when he was done at the end of his little spiel, he goes, you know what? I owe this all to my youth pastor, a guy named Vaughn. I thought, wow, and I found out those two guys were in the same youth group. Next week, another guy from the rescue mission from the inner city LA came and he shared. He was a friend of mine. He didn't mention Vaughn. But when he was done, because he was a member of the church, I go, wasn't it weird that those two guys, both mentioned how much impact their youth pastor Vaughn had on them? And he looks at him, he goes, I know Vaughn. I go, really? The same Vaughn? He goes, yeah. And he tells me the story about, he goes, Vaughn's a pastor in San Diego, and he takes people into the dumps in Tijuana, and he goes, I spent a day with him. He ministers there in the dumps in Tijuana where kids are picking out of the garbage, where kids are just dirty, and he goes, I was just with Vaughn, and we would walk in the city, and these kids would run up to him, and he would just love them. He would just hug them. He'd have gifts for them. He'd have food for them. He'd figure out how to get them showers, get them food, and he goes, and I would just follow him around that whole day. And here's the thing that Dan said to me. He goes, Francis, it was eerie. He goes, the whole time I was walking with Vaughn, I kept thinking, if Jesus was on the earth, I think this is what it would feel like to walk with him. He said he just loved everyone he ran into, and he would tell them about God, and people were just drawn to his love and his affection. And he goes, he made the statement, Dan goes, the day I spent with Vaughn was the closest thing I've ever experienced to walking with Jesus. And I just remember, oh, wow, that's an amazing compliment. The day I spent with Vaughn was the closest thing I've experienced to walking with Jesus. And it made me think, would anyone in their right mind say that about me? That's what I thought. Would anyone say that? Would anyone say that about you? So it made me realize that all this other stuff of, oh, you're such a good speaker, that's not the goal. Or people go, wow, you know so much Bible. That's great. But at the end of the day, would they say, wow, it's weird hanging out with you. I mean, I read about Jesus and then I walk with you, and it's like the same thing, the way you love so much to where it hurts, where you sacrifice and you just give up. It's just this humble, you're just giving. It's weird. And I realized, wasn't that supposed to be the goal of all this knowledge of Christ, that we'd become more like him? And I was thinking, Lord, that's what I want. I don't want to be the best speaker in the world. I mean, if I become that, great, whatever. It just doesn't matter. I don't have to be the most intelligent person on the planet. It's like, what do you want to be known for? I want to be known for someone saying, wow, he's a lot like Jesus. And so I just don't want us to fool ourselves in this room. This is what we were predestined for, right? To be conformed in the image of Christ. And aren't we supposed to walk as Jesus walked?